It is the Mikey Likes You bonus pod. The bonus pod across the USA. Bonus pod, a little bit of an extra spice and seasoning for the main Mikey Likes You podcast. And I put up a poll on my Patreon. If you are not a part of my Patreon yet, please join it. I would really like that. Should be a link below in the show notes. If there isn't, I am remiss in my duties, but I can't express how grateful I am for all my patrons. There is 3 tiers that offer different levels of assistance. On the top tier, it's full on, I'm your personal trainer, and I'm at your beck and call. But I put up a poll there, and I asked, what do you guys want me to talk about on the new bonus pod? Well, the overwhelming winner was exercise selection, with the close second being meal prep and discussions on meal prep. I will start with exercise selection because Doug Brignoli was the guest on the last Mikey Likes You podcast. And let me start off by saying I really like Doug Brignoli, and I encourage you guys to get into his research, read his books, go to his website. I think everything he's talking about is correct and good advice. But you may be saying to yourself, well, Mike, I've been following you and I've been listening to the podcast and hearing you talk about the need to kind of lean towards compound movements, heavy weights, things like that. And what Doug is professing seems to be in glaring contrast to that. Very true. Let me clear things up. Again, I will point out, I'm not trying to say what Doug is saying is wrong or bad. What I am saying is that for the overwhelming majority of people, the biggest bang for your buck and the best benefit and the most progress you will see is going to be with heavy compound movements. Doug has done a lot of research and has come to a conclusion that I think is a good one. That when it comes to isolating tissue damage to certain muscle fibers, the compound movements aren't necessarily the best choice. So if you're looking at an athlete who's already very lean, already at an advanced stage of muscularity, it probably is a good idea to steer away from the heavy compound movements, especially the back squat, where you're putting so much tension on the spine and so much stress on the lumbar area, the lower back. That is totally true. I will give you a little anecdote, which I talked about in the newest episode of the Mikey Likes You podcast, which was a Q&A. Stan Efferding, a guy that I respect very much, I think a real genius in the world of nutrition and training, officially the strongest IFBB pro bodybuilder in the world. Okay, we're talking about the strongest bodybuilder on the planet. A couple years ago, he moved to Venice Beach, here in Venice Beach, to train with legendary bodybuilder Flex Wheeler. In that 6-month time where he was training, and he's written about it pretty extensively, 2 a days, pretty high volume, 6 months, standard kind of bodybuilder, old school bodybuilder breakdown. He got shredded and full muscles and everything, and he wanted to get into the best physical shape of his life at that point. And he didn't squat or deadlift or bench press, not once. They were focusing on stress and contraction in the targeted muscles, and those 3 exercises just didn't provide that much efficiency and effectiveness when it comes to generating contractions in the muscles that you're looking for, whether it be the chest, biceps, quads, things like that. That being said, he's the strongest fucking bodybuilder on the planet. The point I'm making is these techniques, the back squat, the deadlift, they do increase the level of injury. They don't necessarily provide the greatest contraction or isolation of the muscles that you're intending to work. But they provide a tremendous advantage in many other ways. And I do believe the advantages that they provide have to come before you're able to take advantage of the exercises that Stan did with Flex Wheeler and the exercises that Doug Brignoli is promoting. Imagine, if you will, your physique is your finances. What Doug is professing, what Stan was going through with Flex, that is the investments that Warren Buffett is making. Those are the investments that people who are running, $500 billion hedge funds are looking to invest in. Doug Brignoli was Mr. fucking America a couple times over. He's 60 years old and shredded and jacked. You better believe that he's going to be able to glean more from a cable sissy squat than he is from the amount of weight he would have to put on his back and the amount of reps he would have to do in a squat to even get the same kind of tension in his quads and in his glutes. If you're an average dude or chick trying to get in shape, you can't even access that type of investment, if you will. You're a person who has a minimum wage job and no liquid income. So what Warren Buffett is doing with his money should be no fucking interest to you. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to have a basic level of motor function, cellular activity, force development, and strength to even be able to get to the point where you're worrying about isolation. Is a preacher, a dumbbell preacher curl probably better overall for your just for your biceps than a chin up? Fuck yeah, it is. But if you can't do one body weight chin up, don't even fucking talk to me about dumbbell preacher curls. I can tell you firsthand, as a 19, 20-year-old guy, I spent so much effort reading Flex magazine and looking at people's workout routines and trying to emulate it and doing a lot of hammer strength movements and cables and shit. And I spent years being the do you even lift bro guy. And it wasn't until, as a natural, before I even got into like competitive bodybuilding and steroids and whatnot, it wasn't until I broke down and had someone really walk me through the real compound, and being meticulous about my form in developing the deadlift, squat, and getting good at those and hammering them and really building a core amount of strength that I was even able to 3-4 years later start to worry about things like just isolating contractions. I think Ben Pekulski's ideas on training, I think that he is one guy that I would talk about that I really think has nailed it, and I emulate a lot when I'm dealing with people that I give advice to or clients or whatever. And that is Ben, just like me, just like Stan, just like Flex, just like Doug Brignoli, agrees that, for instance, a bench press, a barbell bench press, probably not the best way to develop contraction in the pectoral muscles. So what should you do? You should analyze it and then, yes, work in something like a standing cable crossover, where you can really flex that pectoral muscle. But you cannot forego something like the dumbbell or barbell bench press, because you also have to take into consideration, when it comes to physique development, things like force development and overall strength are a much bigger factor than just basic contraction. Okay? When you get to be The Rock, when you get to be, Flex Lewis or Dorian Yates, absolutely you can start to lean away from those things. Much like when someone becomes a multimillionaire and has tons of liquid money, your ability to invest and how you spend your money becomes glaringly different than someone who's just trying to get started in the world of finance. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that analogy can sit with you. I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't listen to these men or women and that these ideas are wrong, because they are correct. As far as sheer tension on the quadricep muscles, the back squat isn't necessarily the best exercise. But if you learn how to do it properly and get into, some deeper reps with some serious weight in the squat, and you can start doing that with some consistency, your metabolic benefit, the chemical benefit, the absolute, your work capacity, your overall metabolic activity is going to be sky high. much higher than it would be if you went for a jog, much higher than it would be if you tried to fuck around with some, circuit training boot camp type thing. This is where your money is made at first, okay? This is where you can take yourself from someone who can not worry about necessarily force development intention and start looking into the idea of isolation and protecting your lumbar and your knees and whatnot. As long as you're squatting relatively realistic normal person weights, the danger is very low. Very low. But I agree with all these men that once you get to a certain level, and I'm starting to flirt with that level, because I have gained a little bit of strength. I'm by no means world class when it comes to strength. I'm not even a competitive if you're looking at powerlifting. But for a 42-year-old man who's 175 pounds, I have to, if I'm going to do a 10-rep squat, I have to start getting up over 315 pounds, over 3 plates. At this point in my life, I don't necessarily know if that's the best deal. But if I was 20% body fat and incapable of squatting even my body weight, it would definitely be more worth it than it would to do something like a leg extension or a sissy squat. Okay? So I just wanted to clear that up. That's definitely my take on things, and I can bring on other people to kind of back that up. You look at a guy like Mark Sisson. Okay? Mark Sisson is a man in his 60s, shredded to the bone, in great health, in great physical condition. He's a man who relies on strictly on 4 or 5 compound movements in different planes of movement, and he just hammers those home, and he takes care of his diet. And look at that guy. So when you're looking at someone like the strongest bodybuilder in the world, Stan Efferding, or someone like a former Mr. America who has lived his whole life fucking shredded to the bone like Doug Brignoli, take into consideration that that's not necessarily applicable to you, just someone who wants to go from average to exceptional and to stay lean. You stay lean year round. When it comes to meal prep, I got a lot of questions about, you say, hey, Mike, you say always weigh things raw when you're tracking. And I stand behind that, because you have to understand when you cook anything, whether it be a carb, whether it be animal protein, whether it be vegetable protein, when you cook things, the weight changes dramatically. How you cook them makes so that the weight change varies. So if I have you weigh 5 ounces of New York strip, if you barbecued it well done compared to if you seared the outside raw, rare, it's going to dramatically change what it weighs after you've weighed it. And if you go pick it up from Trader Joe's already pre-cooked chicken breast, you have no fucking idea how much chicken that is. You really don't, because you don't know how long they marinated it, how long they dealt with it, if they smoked it, if they fucking boiled it, and that's all going to have a big effect. So you always weigh things raw, because that's the only way you can get a consistent reading. That provides problems, right? If you're going to prepare all your meals for the whole week, that's a pisser, because you're like, well, I just want to cook all this beef, this ground beef. I got 2 pounds of ground beef. How am I going to cook this fucking thing and then be able to weigh it raw? My dog's making a ton of noise outside. Here's what you do. Let's say, for easy math, you have 1 pound lean ground beef, okay? You can weigh that raw and then, measure it on your measure, MyFitnessPal or Carbon or whatever you use, okay? For me, let's take me, and you can change it however you see fit. I will typically eat 8 ounces in a serving, okay? So if I know I'm eating 8 ounces in a serving and I'm cooking 16 ounces, what I will do is I will factor in how much 8 ounces is raw and then cook the whole thing. And then after it's cooked, separate it into equal parts. 2 equal parts. If 8 ounces, if it was 4 ounces, I would separate it into 4 equal parts. It doesn't matter what those 4 equal parts weigh. I know that prior to cooking it, it weighed this much and it had this much protein and this much fat and this much calories. But you just then post cook, you weigh it out, and then I separate it into 3 or 4 or 2 different Tupperwares, however much your serving is. So let's take another example. I will typically eat a 1/4 cup of rice. I know how much a 1/4 cup of rice is when it comes to all the macro values and the calories. Okay, that's a serving for me. But if I cook a cup of rice, Then once it's cooked, I'll reweigh it and make sure it's in 4 equal servings. Put it in 4 separate Tupperwares. I have 4 meals that I know have a 1/4 cup of rice in it. Because I've weighed it raw, I've then weighed it post-cooking and made sure that everything's equivalent. So it doesn't really matter what the actual weight is after cooking. I know that the value is such. So that's my biggest tip and best advice for meal prep. And it's what I do every single day. Almost every single day. Now, granted, I understand I have a lot more liberties with people, with my cooking and with my lifestyle compared to someone who works in an office or works in a garage or a construction site. I understand that. But what I do is, instead of cooking like on Sunday for 3 or 4 days, I cook every day in the morning. I wake up and I just cook. I'll usually cook like a pound of meat, varying meats that I like, and about 100 grams of carbs. Be it, sometimes I'll just separate fruits, like I'll put an apple here and like a orange over here, and the very small amount of vegetables that I eat, I usually eat cooked spinach and raw carrots. So I just cook up that pound of meat, and then I separate it into 3 servings, and then I will put the carb, whatever it may be, along with it, and then do 1 or 2 servings of veggies, cook them up or leave them raw, and then separate them. And then I can go to it and just grab it. So that's 3 full meals plus my pre and post workout food, which is typically something a little bit quicker. And I know how much those values are. I don't have to really think much about tracking, and I can just stay with that. And I know if I don't snack outside of that, everything's kind of taken care of. And I found the things that I really think are delicious, and I don't have to fuck with things very much. I just, there's not that much wiggle room. And it also provides me the ability to be a little bit more flexible when I do go out to dinner with my wife, or go out to dinner with, a potential someone for business reasons or whatever. Or if I just get fucking stuck far away from something, I'm filming something, and I have to stop by In-N-Out and get a bunless burger. It provides me a little bit more flexibility because day in and day out, I'm so consistent with everything. So there you go. I love you. And everyone, be happy, be smiley. I'm here to help. And in this crazy mixed up world that makes you think that nobody cares, I do. Be good.